But do you need the fundamental, like, this is where I'm being like semantical in this, because I almost have to concede that science and technology. But if I'm being semantical, say you had a world whereby you took out the scientific method. Say you took out humanity's curiosity of what is past our sky and what fundamentally makes up the world. Like, we're no like and you basically take what is science and you rip out anything that tries to explain how the world works.
Okay, sure.
But you can, and I guess it's like I'm trying to think of how you can word this, because if you rip out everything that is trying to explain life, but then leave in everything that can explain technology, I think you can kind of do it. Because, like, for example, if you're making a gun, for example.
Okay.
Do you technically need to do the scientific method to learn how to make a gun?
You need to understand physics. You need to understand how the metal works, and the heat and explosion.
And I'm going to redact this extremely, extremely strongly. A gun is essentially a long metal tube to attempt to direct a thing in a direction. Okay, great. Yes, if I put a marble down a pipe, that marble's going to go generally as close as it can to the direction of that pipe is facing. It's not going to randomly do a 90-degree turn once it ends the pipe, if it's going fast enough. What else do you need? You need something that can explode. Are you going to say, like, I wouldn't consider a caveman a scientist who created fire, but the idea that things can explode is pretty easy, because we discovered fire without knowing. We discovered fire without really doing science, kind of like we discovered coal burning or fire burning creates heat without really doing science. So,
but to create an explosion, you need a quick burst of pressure. So you need to create pressure and then release it.
Yeah,
so you need some way to quantify it, or like at least measure it in some precision.
I feel like
the formulation of gunpowder is actually like really, really complex. Like it's essentially, when it comes down to it, it's three basic chemicals that you can find anywhere, but to get that like balanced properly is actually quite a bit of work. And like, I guess you're not wrong on some level, because the printing press, you don't really need advanced scientific knowledge to learn how to make a printing press. Egyptians were making papyrus. All it really comes down to is figuring out how to get ink. There's octopus ink. I'm sure that a caveman could have gotten that, and then made some form of a mechanism that pushes these letters and characters
gotta
down.
Have free body diagrams.
But
gotta do the mechanics.
But like, the point I'm trying to make is this: it's not outside of the realm of belief for me that a caveman could invent a printing press or the internet, but I doubt it. I don't think that it could happen. If we're going to go back to the idea of a gun, how much mathematics, engineering, and science has went into that gun to make a musket into a sniper rifle that can shoot you from 5 kilometers away. The leap in that, I think, is akin to the difference between bacteria and people. It's not that we wouldn't be able to do anything. It would be we would be confined to doing things very, very poorly for a very, very long time. And in the context of planet Earth, you got to get in and you got to get out. Like the dinosaurs, they stuck around here too long, and a meteor took them out. We've been here for 100,000 years, and it is a goddamn blessing that we haven't been hit by something that's wiped us out, or something hasn't wiped us out. So the impetus for a society to be able to correct itself and to better itself exponentially faster is really, really important. So like, while we could meander along and gradually figure out, oh hey, if you put inside of this tube rifling, then our projectiles will start flying straighter in this gun. Like, that might take us 10,000 years, but with the scientific method it took us 50 or 100. Like, it's this idea of being able to go back and identify a problem and then reformulate and fix and retool from there, that I think is indispensable with science.
Here's my question. If under a religious rule, a religion, and you believed every single thing religion taught you in terms of how the world works in the classical sense, God did everything, 6,000 years old, whatever. I don't think that necessarily, but this would be more of a science question, I don't think that necessarily would inhibit someone from being, say, a devout Catholic scientist to be able to formulate gunpowder. There are a lot of scientific discoveries that do not conflict at all with biblical beliefs or biblical stories. So when I say take out the things that are essentially looking beyond the sky and under a microscope, what I'm essentially saying is anything that could possibly conflict with a religious story just doesn't happen. So Gunnar, your entire research project right now, we're not even going to do it because it doesn't even really matter. However, I like from a science perspective, I think that you could end up like you don't need Darwin to exist to figure out how to optimize a gun. You could easily have someone who comes in with scientific method who doesn't question biblical doctrine and still end up with getting a really high powered sniper rifle. I would have to go in and look at science history of what major scientists there were, but I can't because even if you kind of think of a lot of old classic scientists, they were religious to an extent. So you just select the few that you need to get to a gun.
That's like saying, like, the Nazi scientists, like, if you went back to 1940 Germany, all of the scientists in Germany were Nazis. It's just like, because they were doing it doesn't mean that it was right. Just because the scientist that discovered, gunpowder, just because he was Christian, it doesn't really change his impact, because as a person you can still practice faith in one and actively do science. Like, I don't think that those aren't.
It depends on the field, though, because like if you're a Christian who believes that the Earth is 6,000 years old and you're a geologist,
definitely,
you shouldn't be a geologist. Or if you're a Nazi and you're studying genetics, you're going to be probably pretty biased towards some sort of eugenic view of the world or something.
So that's what I'm trying to say, though. Like, all you, like, in terms of shifting powers from religious to other places so that society can make that pressure, you don't really need biology at all. You just need a bunch of engineers.
But it's the method. Like, I was I said earlier, I was misusing science, and like, when I say science, I'm meaning the scientific method and kind of this system in general. And I think that these people have used this method maybe without putting a name to it, but at its heart, it's still the same method. It's just hadn't had a name put to it yet.
See, I kind of worry, though, like, if you're someone coming in saying the scientific method and saying that this is the method that I'm using, and it's the scientific method, and it's this way of thought, and it's associated with science, but really it's just the method we're talking about. But it just happens to have science in the name. The potential issue that you could, like, that statement you could easily die upon is if you got someone who understands the various philosophies of knowledge. Are they going to come in and just say the scientific method is just the bastardized side product of what a philosopher calls basic logic?
Yeah, they can go ahead and do that, but
that doesn't make it science. It just makes it logic.
It's just a semantic argument at that point. It's, you can call it Chris or you can call it Christopher. It's I think the same thing to me.
I think at bottom the distinction here is when we talk about the scientific method, or at least in the context of this conversation, where I think what we're really saying is the idea or the principle that human beings can figure out the truth. Like, we just have to think about it, do some experiments, or make observations and think about it, and we could figure out what's true, or at least come to a better understanding. And that runs contrast to the more religious approach, which is revelatory knowledge. It's like revealed truth. You sort of meditate, or you read the Bible or something, and that tells you what's true. And or more succinctly, knowledge, it comes from God, right? It comes from some divine source. Humans are imperfect, and so humans can't derive what's true. God is perfect, and only the divine can provide what's true. I think that's the main distinction here. And so if you're purely a religious person, without and you don't have the idea that, or you don't run with the principle that humans can derive truth, then I don't think you can invent a gun. I don't think you can invent the internet. I think it's that principle of humans can figure it out that is required in order for that to happen.
Ending that chapter, I'm gonna call Gunnar on something else, and I want him to explain himself.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Gunnar said something along the lines of, he used the word studying the Bible and figuring out what's in the Bible and doing biblical studies of their various doctrines. And then he jumped and said that's a waste of time. Gunnar, would you like to enlighten me on what that means?
You can probably get as much knowledge, if not more, from reading a various subset of other books, other literature, whether that be Chaucer, whether that be Aesop's Fables. You don't just need one book, and I think to dedicate entire semesters, hours at a time, chunks of your life to go over one book in extraordinary detail, unless you're doing a PhD in that, I think that's an extraordinary large waste of time.
So there's a couple issues with your statement. Firstly, I don't think any Christian who's actually an active Christian or Catholic, I guess, would ever consider the Bible one book, because technically it is not one book.
It's 12, right?
I don't have my Bible anymore on me, so I'm not entirely sure. But it is multiple books.
You can put it all in one book, though.
So it's
well, that's why I went to Chaucer. Chaucer, the Canterbury Tales, is in a collection of about, I think, 50 short stories.
That's more books.
That's more books. Shakespeare.
Why don't I just put that all in one book?
Aesop's
the exact same way that we do any other English.
But okay, you can. But why waste all that time on one book, though? Like,
it's not one book. That's the issue. Like a
if I'm going from of
Canterbury
books.
Tales, and I put Canterbury Tales in one book, it's now one book. If I read an encyclopedia, that's one book, but I'm reading 19,000 different things.
Okay.
This is minutia.
Like, I guess, like, sure.
But my ultimate thing is I just to me, what you're saying sounds like the only reason that you're dismissing reading that book based on is the fact that it has a religious tie. I've not heard a rationale from you saying why that book specifically is exempt from gaining knowledge, because technically if you read
I never said that.
If you read
I don't think you did.
No, I never said that. I said you can reference the Bible. That's fine, but spending that inordinate amount of time, to me, especially when you're fucking like 15 years old, it sounds a lot like indoctrination. That doesn't sound like teaching. That sounds like, hey, let's indoctrinate people into believing a fucking book. It doesn't sound like knowledge. That doesn't sound like, hey, let's figure out the deeper meaning behind that. It sounds like, hey, let's cram this down your throat for so fucking long that you're going to start getting gaslit into believing that this shit's real.
I think it can be that, but very often it is like a literary study tied to the
it's a literary study.
Worldview.
Yeah, it's a literary study designed to show you the glory of God. I don't know how that's an acceptable way to spend your time, like explicitly in school. You can gain a lot of knowledge from a lot of different books, including the Bible, including the Quran, including the Guru Granth Sahib, including all of these Buddhist textbooks. There's a lot of stuff out there. You do not need to limit yourself to the New Testament of the Bible specifically, because when I say that, I wasn't referencing the Old Testament, because I think those are different volumes, and I don't want to confuse by saying the Bible, Old Testament versus New Testament, right?
So
those are two different books.
I will say that there's one note there that I really liked you hit on. It's the fact that, okay, I like and then she said that you shouldn't limit yourself to one book, because in a way you implied, why is the Bible better than the Quran or these other religious texts? And to a large degree, I do agree that to unless you've read multiple biblical texts, you cannot say that one's better than the other. I think that's just not, but that's my scientific opinion coming through, where
you have no control.
You need to compare. Yeah, you have no control group. You have to compare it to something. But if you just blindly go in saying this is the best book, that's a bit weird. So, if you're someone who has faith and you knock other faiths without understanding their reference point, that's a bit weird.